So here we are, ladies and gentlemen, on the last of Sir Llew Edwards' YouTube interviews, and I'm just again on the way to the John Oxley Library. At this particular time I've got a poster from Barley Oats, which is a personal message, and also you may have seen the Des Ritchie series where we had all the pagoda paperwork, and Des has kindly agreed to donate all that paperwork into the John Oxley Library. And I just thought I'd do this final bit of an interview here as an intro into Sir Llew, because you're here at the end of Sir Lew's third series, just a wonderful, wonderful conclusion. So I wanted to just thank everyone so much for watching and say goodbye and thank you. Good afternoon again, ladies and gentlemen, and Sir Llew and I have had a very interesting discussion, and we thought we might start this particular discussion off about what a different expo it would have been if the Goodwill Bridge and the Kawupa Bridge had actually been in situ at the time of Expo, because the Expo site was chosen because it was been a long time identified as a bit of a rundown area for Brisbane. And the birth of where South Bank is now was obviously as a direct result of the work that was done during Expo, even though the place was completely demolished. But the spirit and the vibe has been left behind. So if you would like to talk to that particular theme.
When the Expo concept was granted to Brisbane by the Australian government, and the Queensland government undertook or underwrote the responsibility for the funding and for supervision of the board, it was indeed a very brave decision, there's no doubt. There were three sites considered by the government on my recommendation, but South Bank, or what it was called South Brisbane then, was very rundown. Only a few little heritage requirements imposed upon us, and so therefore we technically could almost clear the site except for those 3 or 4 necessary historic buildings that were there and are still there today. And we had the power of resumption given to us overnight, as it were, and then settled with the owners over the next few months. That gave us an opportunity to almost clear the whole site and start planning as if it were indeed a clear site. We then designed the design, dare I say those words, so that it would be temporary, buildings only, and then at the end of the exposition we would remove those buildings, which we did, and hopefully give another purpose to South Brisbane and what was then known out of the Expo success, South Bank.
Yes, and it was quite surprising. And what I might do is I'll actually clip into this particular section the picture of South Bank, all except for the pagoda, which I've got a very interesting photo from South Bank itself, and the sort of the gestation, and what I was really getting at from my original question was that the links into the city from the Goodwill Bridge and from the Kawupa Bridge, I think have just empowered Brisbane itself, hasn't it? I mean, it's just leveraged up the vision that you would have had coming towards the end of Expo, when you were quite rightly still fully involved in not only, okay, it's running down, and when the next, well, where it's going to go after that, because you had a very hands-on role in that transition period, didn't you?
Yes, and that was part of my responsibilities as chairman of what was called the Brisbane Exposition and South Bank Redevelopment Authority. But by that stage, a lot of us were extremely fatigued and worn out, almost, dare I say that, in health and so forth, averaging sometimes 20 hours a day over 7 days a week for 5 years. So most of us in the day-to-day operations who made recommendations to the government said, look, we've done our job. It's now over to, we think, another group, rather than us starting from the beginning again on a new project. The government, reluctantly I might say, at that stage decided that was our decision. There would be no upset from that. They were, from that point of view, and they then set up the South Bank Redevelopment Authority, which could look at the redevelopment of that area.
And that actually crystallised a bit of an issue for the state government, didn't it? Because all of a sudden it had to write out a cheque, effectively to itself, paying out the temporary, I think at that time, could be wrong, but I think it was around $180 million, which was still owed on the, in inverted commas, credit card, and then converted into a more longer term financial facilities.
Yes, the so-called debt that was left was the acquisition cost of the land, which the government underwrote, and but had to put it in the name of the Brisbane Exposition, and we then, of course, being wholly owned by the Queensland government, handed on a $1 exchange, as it were, not only the liabilities but the benefits that were there with that beautiful block of land, with the removal of the pavilions. They could then improve the site for long-term occupancy as it is today. And so it was a great credit to the government that they didn't just commercially sell the land. They did in some cases, but the long-term arrangement was to have a people's area which had developed within the Expo experience.
Which was the essence of the spirit of Expo, because people so strongly identified with the experience that they were desperately wanting it to continue. And that, I think, as we were talking a bit earlier, where you're still stopped in the street and people regale you with experiences and stories about their feelings of Expo. And I know that you're an incredibly giving person, but eventually it must, not exactly wear thin, but it must make life a bit stressful occasionally.
Well, I guess that I've also had the glory, as it were, if I could put in inverted commas, of being associated with an event that won the hearts of Australia. There's not the slightest doubt that when one listens to what were major events throughout Australia in the last 50, 60 years, the one that always comes up is Expo 88. That's what they remember, and they still call it the Expo site. So it did have an impact upon Australian people, upon Queensland people, and particularly Brisbane people, that there's a bit of a feeling of ownership of the site. And I think the governments and councils have done very well in maintaining that interest by the people of this state.
Yes, I'm hoping that the Lord Mayor has a look at some of the assets that were left behind from Expo and reimagines their use and role, especially as we go into the G20, because I think some of them can have a much greater impact and greater benefit for the tourism flows into Brisbane. You've got the G20, and then you've got the Commonwealth Games, and the Commonwealth Games obviously is not focused on Brisbane. So we need to build our assets to give a reason for those people to actually visit Brisbane, and if they're visiting Brisbane, then maybe hopefully stay a little bit longer, as the current push is.
No doubt.
Because one of the things that I wanted to quickly delve into is that the world market for tourism is so totally different now than what it was in the early 80s when you were conceiving and driving Expo, because now you've almost got like a permanent state of mind, especially in Singapore, where it's a city-state very similar to Brisbane, and they continually reinvent themselves, almost continually have an Expo frame of mind with the wonderful assets that they've got, and even though they haven't had any of those major expositions, they've been able to create the essence and the theme of it just out of their very being almost, and so it's something that we should grab hold of, the Expo, and then make sure that we keep reinventing it and revisiting it and re-injecting it back into what we're doing.
I share that view that, but as time goes for both the Commonwealth Games and World Expo 88, there are those who intimately had an association with either or both, have moved on and gone to another life, perhaps another Expo in the sky, as somebody said to me the other day. And I think the important thing is that we have learned from the opportunities that we had then, and to perhaps to continue to create opportunities of similar kind of events, such as already proposed, and not necessarily an Expo, but not necessarily Commonwealth Games, but events that will focus on Brisbane and Queensland, that will make it attractive to people throughout the world.
And I'm sure that the spirit of Brisbane will see that exact thoughts and feelings are achieved, hopefully.
I think it was Bob Hawke as Prime Minister, if I recall, but somebody at the closing ceremony said, may we never forget Brisbane Expo 88, may we live in the spirit forever. And I think that was a very touching point, and in fact I saw tears in the eyes of some people sitting around me, because they felt that a spirit had been generated that must never die. Not so much the Expo, or not so much the event itself, or the Commonwealth Games and that event, but the spirit of togetherness and happiness and safety and dreaming about a new world, if possible. They were the things that came with the events like the Commonwealth Games and Expo, and may it never die, may it be here forever.
And I think that is a brilliant spot for us to stop our series of interviews this morning. Sir Llew, thank you so much for taking the time out. It has been an absolute joy, and the series of interviews, now more than 165 after the series this morning, has tried to delve into and find that magic that you've talked about. And Sir Llew, just thank you so much. It is a pleasure and a joy, as always, talking to you. Thank you.